Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations, and you're with Simon today. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at the new moon in Leo, and this is for the 8th of August 2021. So what I want to share with you today is a collection of my ideas, my sensory perception of what I see this new moon to present to us, and some of our thoughts that we've gathered, both myself and Jen, in terms of what this will, present to us as a collective, and how can we also take this energy and internalize it on an individual level for a deeper state of empowerment. So really looking forward to jumping into this conversation with you today. As always, one of the things that I deeply encourage is to watch this video in a place or at a time where you have some space to really sit and be present and digest. Sometimes that's not the case, but it is something that I found personally for myself, just when taking some space, a time out, and to digest some content on the internet that is related to processing the nature of our reality, or even trying to make sense of the things that we're going through at the moment. So deeply encourage that if that's available to you. We're going to change things up a little bit today. Usually what I do is I have a kind of introduction conversation, and then I go into the chart work. So what I'm going to do first is actually look at the astrology for those of you that want to have the astrology, and then I'll jump into my personal intuitive reflections, thoughts and ideas around this as well. Okay, so astrology, chart, and then reflections. You'll also see that I've broken this video up into chapters. This is something that I'm integrating more and more, just to give you that opportunity to maybe listen to a segment of this video without having to fast forward and go back. And that probably gives you a better opportunity to sit in a more quiet place to listen to the video. So what is it about this new moon in Leo that's going to be incredibly revolutionary for us? And I think that this idea of revolution at this point in time has got a very deep attachment to it, based on social media being part of our lives, the way that the world is looking in terms of polarization, and the diverse perspectives that are present on the world right now. That revolution on one side could look like complete, archaic ideas and not wanting to be progressive, and revolution on the other side can look something along the lines of taking a stand and being part of a change that we all agree to. And so this is a really loaded word at this point in time, and I'm really hoping to maybe in this new moon in Leo give some context as to not only how the astrology is reflecting these natural instinctual impulses within us, but also how it's actually manifesting and materializing on the more physical plane where we can see it, and how this has a lot to do with the way that our trajectory, energetically at least, is taking place and where we're going with this. So hopefully today I'll be able to capture some of the deeper insights that I have as well regarding this new moon. Okay, so let's jump into the chart first, like I said before, and let's go ahead and just look at some of the aspects that I think are profound in their nature. So let me change the color. There we go. I like to have that one there. So the first thing that I want to share, actually, for those of you that are new to astrology and are watching this channel, for those of you that are familiar with astrology, and for those of you that have been watching this for a long period of time, I want to present the idea that when you're looking at this chart, when you're looking at the symbols in the circle, and you're looking at all these lines and all these configurations, what you're essentially looking at here is a pattern of reality that is essentially emerging. I like this word. It really drives home the ability to describe something that is astrology, that is deeply phenomenal, and can sometimes be incredibly complex to try to describe to other people who are maybe not inclined to have an interest in looking at reality through the lens of astrology. So I like to see this as symbols that allow us to access emergent patterns or emerging patterns in our life. And they give us an insight into what types of, or what scope there are, what is going to take place. Okay, so what scope, when I talk about what scope, what I mean is the scope in which a certain pattern will exist within. So let's jump straight into Jupiter in Aquarius, which we know has just moved into Aquarius. You can see it sitting here at 28 degrees. Okay, and there we go. You can see it at 28 degrees there, right? Jupiter just enters Aquarius, and you can also see that it has a little R next to it. So the scope that I refer to here is that Jupiter in Libra is not going to be on the emergent radar. We're not going to see Jupiter in Libra emergent patterns. We're going to see Jupiter in Aquarius emerging patterns. So we can be pretty clear that if we see Jupiter in Aquarius, that we would not be looking towards Libra-esque themes in terms of emerging patterns. We would see that the scope is pretty much contained and defined within this realm. So what I'm sharing here is that if you enter astrology and you are all looking at your own personal astrology charts, or you're looking at your own, you're looking at the transits, and you're curious as to how or why these patterns, in a sense, have a synchronicity to the events in your life, my very simplistic interpretation of the synchronicity or the synchronistic events that take place in life and the correlation to the astrology is that they reflect a kind of way in which we can notice and observe emergent patterns arrive in our lives, and because we emotionally connect to them, we create storylines around them, and then those storylines become emotional ways in which we are able to understand the history of our experiences. And when we look at it moving forward, like as in doing a forecast of the future, we could say, well, the scope of Jupiter in Aquarius could look like these certain patterns, because we understand that the archetype of Aquarius looks like this, and we know if we put Jupiter in that scope, it will create a certain amount of patterns that will look like that. So I know that that's a lot to kind of just throw on you right now, but it is, I wrote it down as my notes over here as I was looking at these aspects, and I felt compelled in some way to share with you my internal relationship to how I look at those symbols and how I sense, feel, and orientate myself to the type of language that I will use when describing these astrology symbols and aspects. Okay. All right. So on my list, Jupiter in Aquarius just moved into Aquarius, as we know. And for those of you that are not familiar with astrology, pardon me, not familiar with evolutionary astrology, Jupiter at the moment is forming an aspect. So let's do this over here. Jupiter is forming an aspect all the way to Mercury there at 23 degrees Leo. So Mercury is there, and as you can see, Mercury is sitting there 23 degrees and Jupiter's at 28. Now, Jupiter, within the context of our human experience, is the way in which we form our worldview. Okay? If I were to expose you to an environment for 3 years and then pull you out of that environment and then sit you down and ask you a bunch of questions about and describe your experience, what you would do is you would extract from your memory of your life and of that environment and how you were interfacing with it, what you learned about it, all the things that you found yourself developing as a worldview and orientation. That goes into the function of Jupiter. Okay, and so each and every one of us here on Earth requires a point of reference in order for us to make sense of the phenomena of reality. Okay, so when we're looking at Jupiter in this chart and we're looking at Jupiter in your natal chart, what you are trying to make sense of here is how your worldview will be shaped, influenced, and created, and those planets, wherever they are, Jupiter in Aquarius, Jupiter in Taurus, etc., will contribute a lot, or contribute a great deal to your worldview. So Jupiter in Aquarius says to us that we as a race, as a human race right now, are all in different ways experiencing our worldview being, in a sense, challenged, Aquarius, by patterns that are emerging that are on one level very chaotic and unstable. This is Aquarius, so destabilizing. We are watching our world view and the collective world view be shaped by events and circumstances that require a deep level of objectivity, okay? And we are looking at a world in which the landscape of our cultural truths or our cultural worldview is being radically transformed. So that Jupiter is an incredibly profound influencing, or it's influencing us in a great, in a profound way. And the way in which what I like to see, because there's multiple layers to it, and I don't want to be too complex here because of all of the stuff in Virgo at the moment, and I've already noticed that I am. But if I were to say in a very simplistic term, Jupiter in Aquarius is reflecting the potential in each of us individually to objectify our own cognitive biases and to ask the question, what is it that I believe to be true? And how have I come to those beliefs? What has shaped me in everything that has come before this moment that has ultimately solidified or made my worldview the way that it is? Okay, so in simplistic terms, the question I would propose to everyone with Jupiter in Aquarius as it's retrograde at the moment is to ask yourself the question, how have I come to the things that I believe? And what influences me? So you could even go ahead, and this is part of the end of the conversation, is take, like, just for a week, or maybe even just for a day, look at the things that you expose yourself to and ask yourself how much of what you expose yourself to contributes or reinforces a worldview that you have. Okay? Your beliefs, as it were. The opposition to Jupiter, sorry, to Mercury, and this is what I wanted to get into, was that Mercury has to do with the language that we will use to articulate these deeper perceptions of reality. Okay, so in previous videos, I talked about Mercury being the left brain and Jupiter being the right brain. So you have this intuitive awareness based on experiences, very abstract, nonlinear, Jupiter. And then you would have something along the lines of Mercury, which is very logical, left brain, gathering function that allows us to make and develop language and use words to articulate objects in time-space reality. So this opposition that sits between Jupiter and Mercury over here is what is called the gibbous phase opposition, okay? And this gibbous phase opposition says that the way that these two planets will interact with each other is one of an internal paralysis. That's why the narrative that I have with this chart so far with this specific aspect has to do with checking in with your own beliefs and asking yourself, are you sure that what you believe to be true is the truth? Or is it shaped by what you've been influenced by in the world? Okay. Now, the Leo part over here, that's part of this energy, says that Leo wants us to validate things. Okay, Leo is validation. Leo is, hey, I exist. So with Mercury in Leo forming a gibbous phase gibbous phase opposition to Jupiter, what we will have is certain shocks that we will experience that will cause us to internalize our own certainty. So not so much internalize it, but it will force us inwardly to ask ourselves the question, does our certainty bring any value to the conversation? Or are we, in a sense, with our beliefs, so certain about what we believe to be true that we're missing certain blind spots that potentially could influence the way that we see reality at a deeper level. Okay, so that Mercury in opposition to Jupiter in Aquarius Leo, with the gibbous phase as part of the way that that opposition will show up, is put yourself in a position and say, what it is that I think I know, let me hold space for something else to show me something that I might know that will contribute to the potential for deeper self-understanding. And that deeper self-understanding will eventually at some point lead to the potential for deeper quality of conversation, as in we're contributing to something more than what we think to be true for ourselves. That's what that opposition is doing. And of course, this is part of an entire holistic chart here. So this is one dimension that is feeding other dimensions of this chart, which I'll jump into. So if you look at the next one here, Mars square the nodes, I actually have this in my chart. I have Mars at 16 degrees Virgo square my nodes. So here you have Mars sitting at 6 degrees Virgo, and there's the nodes at 8. All right. And you know from evolutionary astrology that when you have a planet that is forming a square, which is that red line that's there, can you see here? There's Mars at the moment. Sorry, pardon me, got it all wrong. There's Mars over there. Okay, and if we go all the way down, we'll see that it's squaring the nodes, yeah, indicated by that square. And the square is a representation of tension. And the tension is there to create adaptation, or to create growth, right? To push growth in some way. So that tension forces us to address something. And then as we address it and interact with it, we form a deeper understanding around whatever that tension is about. So Mars squaring the nodes says to me that there's this deep tension that is occurring relative to our ability to action, make choices, or follow through with something, Mars, to instinctually respond to something. And that tension has a lot to do with the nature of our beliefs and the way that we structure our beliefs. So there's the beliefs, and then the way that we structure our beliefs. How do we communicate our ideas? How do we formulate our opinions? What influences our ability to formulate our opinions? What shapes our narrative? And this is the key here with the opposition between Jupiter and Mercury. Notice how Mercury is the planet that is associated with the North Node. Mercury, Gemini. For those of you that follow EA, Mercury is the planet that is associated with Gemini, and the North Node is in Gemini. So you see a repeating theme here. Okay, so this Mars squaring the nodes tells us about a tension that we're all experiencing at the moment between the past and the future. And the tension has to do with the narratives that we have, that we hold about reality, about life, right? The position that we see the world through. And that this Jupiter that's retrograde in Aquarius, that is forming an opposition to Mercury in a gibbous phase, says one of the ways that this tension brings deeper understanding and clarity is to ask ourselves the question, what truths do we hold within us that are shaped by the past that prevent us from being able to move forward? Okay. Now that's what I talk about in terms of liberation right at the beginning, because what's been very clear to me as I do the work that I do is this Uranus in Taurus squaring Saturn in Aquarius. Okay. You see there Saturn in Aquarius. And most of you will know that my position on Saturn in Aquarius square Uranus in Taurus for the whole year has to do with the reorganization and restructuring of the bedrock or foundation in which we as a collective and individuals move forward. And because these energies are deeply destabilizing, what is occurring is that people are trying to reinforce their narratives, reinforce their ideas, reinforce their positions on things. And that reinforcement of those positions, ideas, perspectives is all coming from the insecurity and the uncertainty of how radically fast things are changing at the moment. That there is an incredible amount of uncertainty. There's an incredible amount of chaos. There's an incredible amount of transformative energy right now. Okay? Tremendous amount of transformative energy right now with these two planets, and they are radically reshaping the landscape for us at an incredibly large scale that is changing our landscape forever. So this Saturn-Uranus square, on one hand, looks like, from one perspective, remember that the nodes are in Sag Gemini, from one perspective, looks like liberation is going back to a certain way of living. And on the other side, liberation looks like not being or feeling oppressed or not feeling restricted. Okay, so you will know what I'm talking about, right? I don't want to be more explicit or clear about this because I feel that this is something that you either get or you don't. Liberation at the moment has two sides, right? On one side, liberation will look like this to certain people, and liberation on the other side will look like that to certain people. And both sets of groups of people have a common theme, which is this underlying sense of trying to liberate from pre-existing structures. And if I were to remove this from the personal and just show you the emergent pattern of energy that is coming into our reality, what we're experiencing here with this new moon, considering this Jupiter that's here, considering this Mercury opposition that's here, considering this Saturn-Uranus square that's over here, considering the Mars that is squaring the nodes here, is that there's a dynamic tension where there is like a seed that wants to break through the ground, break through the earth, and that there's incredibly profound energy that is sort of pulsating through the seed that wants to break out. It wants to shatter limitations. And every single one of us right now is, in a sense, in this ecosystem of liberation wanting to take place. Right? Something wants to emerge out of us, wants to break out of us, and we're all trying to facilitate this, and it can feel very destabilizing at this stage, which creates the Mars square the nodes. It's a paralysis in choice. It's a paralysis in direction. It's a paralysis in what do I believe to be true. So if you look here, look at Neptune. Sorry, if we look at Neptune, Venus opposed Neptune, there is a dynamic here where we can feel this oscillating Neptune energy that is clarity and delusion. And then you have Venus in Virgo that says, well, my values say this. And another person says, well, my values say that. And so you literally have two sides where one side is looking at the other and saying those values are wrong, and the other side is saying those values are wrong. And that Neptune opposed Venus is reflecting this incredibly difficult and challenging ability to make sense of anything, because there's so much diversity, there's so much complexity, there's so much uncertainty that it's not possible to have certainty in a way that is absolutely certain. You know, it's the nature of the time. So this Venus opposed Neptune is this kind of real struggle between trying to make sense of what could be potentially real, what is versus delusion. All right. And that's obviously influencing the paralysis that's taking place with the Virgo. Now, if I were to extract this a little bit further and look at two things here. One, if you look at Pluto, it's sitting there at the moment, 25 degrees, and you have Neptune sitting there. These are outer planets, so we're talking about social dynamics. And you see they form what is called a yod, or a finger of God, to Mercury. You see that? Mercury 23 degrees, Pluto 25, Neptune 22, Mercury 23. So there's the yod icon. And then you can also see it there as well with Mercury, right? There goes Mercury in conjunct Neptune, in conjunct Pluto. Now, what I see here, and this is an incredibly deep process, is that Mercury is illuminating to us if I were to draw it like this, right? Pluto and Neptune will say, in the past, we had certain ideals, and visions of how we would steer ourselves as a human race. And Capricorn would say, well, here are the laws or regulations or rituals or patterns that we all abide by, and that are a reflection or an honor of these ideals, Neptune in Pisces. And the Mercury in conjunct is pointing to the inability to see that as we shift from one structure of ideological truths to another, that if we were to bring everything that is from the past into the future, we will be stuck reinforcing and replaying over and over the paralysis of the past. And that will lead us to not actually feeling that we could actually move forward in a way that is part of this new moon in Leo, which is creative self-actualization, which is ultimate meaning, which is ultimate purpose. So this new moon is setting the intention for the validation, a deep validation within yourself of what's actually real and alive and meaningful for you. And it's calling you into another realm. And that calling you into another realm requires you to objectify the narratives that you hold about truth, and to observe, Virgo, Venus in Virgo, Mars in Virgo, what it is that is holding you back, what limitations in your thinking, what limitations in your ideals, what limitations within cultural ideals and norms from the past have and do shape your potential for taking that leap into the unknown and to follow something that is bigger than you, right? So what's the story? And so that's where you get the fire trine that sits over here, right? Between this, the fire trine, you see it there? You have to hold that flame in yourself. You have to hold the flame of your own inner truth in yourself. That is your direction. And it means that you can either burn out, or you can feel deeply inspired by a purpose that is bigger than yourself, and to align with something that is calling you. But in order to make that step, you have to cross the threshold. And the threshold is to objectify and look deeply and consciously at the narrative that you use to reinforce your perspective that either keeps you in a state of fear or keeps you in a state of limitation of some sort, something that is rooted in the past. Okay? So that's the message that I see here today. Really intense. I hope that you don't feel overwhelmed, but hopefully it also gives you some deep insight into the process. So here's that's the chart work over here, and I want to shift my attention now to things that I've been doing in the background that I felt complements not only the chart itself, but also what we potentially, individually, should I say, can use this energy to clear out, let go of, and move forward in a new way. So one of the sense makers that I enjoy listening to, and I find a great deal of anchoring in terms of developing my own worldview, is a person called Daniel Schmachtenberger. And one of his talks, well, he actually talks about it in every single video, to be honest, or podcast. He addresses the point, and this is my new favorite word at the moment. I've used it in the past quite a lot, but the way in which, the way of saying it is called limbic hijacking. And what it refers to is that if you're sitting on Facebook, or you're sitting on YouTube, or you're sitting on any social media, for instance, or any place or platform that gives a voice, and that you're taking things in, you are, in a sense, putting yourself in a position where your limbic system can be hijacked by the emotional nature of the material that you may be taking in, or the experiences that are collectively shared for us at the moment. And I think that with this new moon taking place, it's very important for you to begin to consciously look at what it is that you are absorbing, and how what it is that you're absorbing is providing you with the cognitive support, as well as the nourishment for something that enhances your life. Okay, so it's almost like if you're going to invest yourself in something that is taking in information, ask yourself, how can you grow from whatever it is that you're taking in? How can you use this technology, or the technology we're using right now, to deepen your own relationship to yourself and self-awareness, and your capacity to understand the way that you think at a deeper level. And social media, in a sense, or any forms of any platforms that reinforce narratives that we all have at the moment, if we consciously objectify Jupiter, what it is that is being presented to us, and we start to ask deeper questions, not only do we get a deeper capacity to understand what's actually occurring, but it also prevents us from reinforcing our own biases towards certain things. And then when we regurgitate those biases in conversation, we find ourselves actually breaking down a level of deeper conversation that can take place, because we are, in a sense, kind of memeing reality, as opposed to asking deeper questions about a certain narrative. So there's this exploration in really trying to understand the drivers behind why we believe the things we believe, and what is it that these truths do for us, and how they reinforce our worldview or our narrative, and to question those things. Okay, to be observant. Uranus at the moment is the planet that is deeply impacting for all of the planets at the moment. Saturn is retrograde. And so I wanted to bring out that right now, what could be deeply helpful in terms of your ability to navigate this world right now is your sense of being a little bit more open to change or chaos. Okay, being a little bit more open to the idea that if you want to control something in a certain way, to have it a certain way, you may be missing out on the potential for a deeply transformative experience. Because right now, as I said, with this energy, there is a tremendous amount of instability that is offering an opportunity for entrepreneurial type of thinking, right? How can we take ideas that are sort of emerging right now and present them in a way that contributes to developing a world in which we can all find our individuality in, right? Another Leo-esque experience. And so my summary here today with regards to this video is, or the takeaway is, that this energy right now speaks to our ability to look at our worldview and understand that we need a map to orientate ourselves towards. But the map and the environment or the terrain is not the same thing. And we can have a scope of something, but when we travel that road, be open to changes, be open to taking a certain amount of risks, be open to living a little and experiencing the human process, as opposed to, fearing something, and when that fear does show up, to question the narrative behind the fear and to ask yourself, where did that originally begin? Right, so that you can pull out some of these pre-existing experiences that have impacted you in some way, let them go, so that this emerging reality right now can really flourish in a way that may not have even been considered, because we block ourselves from the potential of seeing something bigger than what our most immediate environment gives us. So going with the flow a little bit more in the way of what is emerging for us, and being open and receptive and responsive to life is also a way in which we can deeply benefit from what is emerging in the astrology. All right, so everybody, I really hope that you found a lot of value in this video. And as always, please share your comments in the comments section. Share with me how you understood this video, and any value that you felt that you were able to extract from it, and what your own experiences are as well. Okay? All right, everyone, have an amazing day. Take care. Bye-bye.